So when Jesus, came among us, he came among us situated in an historical context at a time and a place. And in that time and that place, it was an agrarian culture, and a lot of people made their living by kind of scratching their existence out of the ground. With modern agricultural methods, we know that that there are ways of planting seed that are going to be more useful and more fruitful than the way that they used to plant seed. But in fact, in the time that Jesus lived, as he was walking along the road, he would have seen farmers to one side or the other side, and basically what they did when they were walking along through their fields was just throw seed out, and they hoped that some of it would, that by some sort of kind of statistical likelihood that a portion of the seed would take root and flourish, and that they would have a harvest. But they also knew when they were doing that, so that some of the seed would fall into bad ground. They also knew that some of the seed would be eaten by the birds. They knew that not all the seed that they planted was going to turn out and be fruitful. So Jesus was a man who was completely immersed in an historical context. He lived at a particular time and a place, and he used the things that were around him to understand what it was that he was doing and understand what God was doing in human history. So when Jesus saw the farmers out there tossing seed, he said to himself, that's a lot like what I'm doing. Basically I'm going around from town to town, and I'm telling people these little stories, and I'm giving these little cliches and sayings to people, hoping that I can awaken something in their hearts. And I know that when I go out there, that some of the things that I say are not going to actually, be listened to. People are not going to listen to what it is that I'm saying. They're just going to ignore me, and they're going to walk past me, and that's not going to take any fruit. I know that some people are going to get really excited about the message that I have, and they're going to get on fire. But after thinking about it for a few weeks, they're going to go like, who is that guy? And they're going to walk away. And I know that there are going to be some of these seeds that I actually throw out there, and people are going to get excited, and their lives are going to change, and they're going to become totally reversed. So what I'm going to do? I'm going to use this story here that I've just seen, and I'm going to convert it into a teaching about what it is that I'm doing. So Jesus gives us an example in what it is that he's doing. Jesus is a man who is immersed in his own times and has complete faith that God is working in human history, and that God not only is working in human history, but is working in his time and his place. So what Jesus teaches us here is not just about the reception of the word. What Jesus gives us here is an example of how it is that we can be alive in the world as bearers of the seed, as people who carry the word into our lives. Now, none of us really has the kind of ministry that Jesus was summoned to. But Jesus does give us an example of what it is to be rooted in the conditions that we live in. So, when we're walking along from day to day, we encounter a huge number of people. We're standing in the grocery store line, and there's the young mother who's in front of us, and she's got a little baby in the carriage there, and she's got a couple other kids who are playing with candy bars, and she's pulling her hair out, and she's looking for a wallet, and she's got to pay for the food, and then all of a sudden the candy thing collapses, or whatever the situation is. There we are behind her in that particular situation. There are a whole host of things that we can do in that situation. But the very minimum that we should do is to say a little prayer that, she will be able to bear what it is that God has summoned her to do in this particular moment of her life. We're walking along the road, and we see an elderly person who's trying to get across the street, and every time they attempt to go out into the street, somehow or other, suddenly a car comes along that's moving a lot faster than they are, and they pull themselves back. To step out of ourselves, to step out of our situation for a moment, and to be present to that person and help them across the street if that's what it is that the situation requires. to be present in all of our lives, to be contextualized in the moment that we live. This is the mystery that Jesus calls us to, is to live our lives as though, in fact, actually God exists, and that God is watching us, and God cares about what it is that we do in these particular moments as we go about our lives with all the little situations, whether it's through a helping hand or with a prayerful attitude when someone around us has a need. This is what Jesus calls us to in this particular gospel. So, my brothers and sisters, I am well aware that we are in the midst of July, and so I'm mercifully going to bring this to a conclusion with my prayer that we all be bearers of the seed in our lives, as Jesus has taught us, understanding how it is that God is working in the present moment.